There is a number your government already knows. It knows it right now. And if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed for just 30 more days, that number becomes the price you pay every single time you fill your tank. I'm going to tell you exactly what that number is. But before I do, I need you to understand something. Because without this context, the number alone won't scare you enough, and it should. Welcome. If you're new here, this channel breaks down the geopolitical stories that directly hit your wallet, your daily life, and your future. Today we're talking about the most important 21 miles of water on Earth. A stretch of ocean so narrow you can see the opposing coastline on a clear day. And right now, in March of 2026, that strip of water is essentially closed. Tanker traffic has collapsed. Oil is surging. And at your local pump, you are already paying more than you were 2 weeks ago. So let's go through exactly what happened, why it matters, and what comes next, because you need to know this. Let's start at the beginning. To understand what's happening to your gas prices, you first need to understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually is, and why every major economy on the planet trembles when someone threatens to close it. The strait sits between Iran to the north and Oman and the UAE to the south. At its narrowest point, it is just 21 nautical miles across. Think about that. That is roughly the distance between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. And inside that 21-mile gap, according to the USS Energy Information Administration and confirmed by BBC analysis published in early March 2026, there are only 2 shipping lanes, each about 2 miles wide. 2 miles. That is the funnel through which approximately 20% of all the oil traded globally must pass every single day. Not just oil. According to Bloomberg, the strait also carries nearly the same share of the world's liquefied natural gas. Before the conflict began, according to Reuters shipping data, somewhere between 80 and 90 loaded oil tankers passed through the strait every single day. 80 to 90 tankers, each one carrying roughly 2 million barrels. Do that math and you start to understand why a single political decision made in Tehran can within days change what you pay at the pump in Cleveland, Houston, or Sacramento. Now here's something that most people get completely wrong about the United States in this situation. People say, well, America produces its own oil now. We have the shale boom. We don't need Middle Eastern oil. And on the surface that sounds reassuring. But actually, that argument completely falls apart the moment you look at how global oil markets actually work. CNN ran a detailed analysis on this in early March 2026, and the headline told the whole story. American oil boom can't save you from the Iran war gas price spike. Here's why. Even though the United States is a major oil producer, it is still a net crude importer. According to the Washington Post, America imports more crude oil than it exports. And the global oil market is one interconnected pricing system, not a series of isolated national pools. When a tanker carrying Saudi crude gets struck by a drone in the Persian Gulf, the price of oil produced in Texas goes up too. It goes up immediately, because traders price in risk globally. So yes, we drill, yes, we frack, but we are not immune, not even close. Here is where things get really alarming, and I want you to pay close attention. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a joint military operation called Operation Epic Fury. According to reporting from CBS News, the USS Department of Defense, and Wikipedia's documentation of the 2026 Iran war, that opening salvo involved nearly 900 strikes in the first 12 hours alone. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed. Iran's nuclear facilities were targeted. And within hours, Iran began retaliating, not just with missiles into military bases, but with drone and missile attacks on oil infrastructure and, critically, on shipping in and around the Strait of Hormuz. According to The Guardian, reporting on March 3, 2026, at least 4 tankers were struck by drones. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, publicly vowed, and this was reported by Reuters and Al Jazeera on March 2, 2026, to attack any ship attempting to pass through the strait, not threaten. Vow. And according to the Los Angeles Times and multiple other outlets, the IRGC went a step further, threatening to set ships on fire inside the strait itself. Stop and let that land for a second. The world's most important oil corridor, the one that carries a fifth of all global oil, was being threatened with literal fire. And the market reacted exactly the way you would expect it to. According to Bloomberg, by March 6, 2026, West Texas Intermediate crude, the benchmark for USS oil prices, had surged to $90.90 per barrel. That was a 12.2% jump in a single day. But the weekly number is the one that should really get your attention. According to CNBC, WTI crude posted a 35.63% weekly gain, the largest weekly increase since 1983. Let me repeat that. The largest weekly oil price surge since 1983. Yahoo Finance confirmed the same figure, calling it the biggest weekly oil price jump since at least 1985. Either way you count it, we haven't seen anything like this in 4 decades. And according to shipping intelligence firm Lloyd's List, tanker traffic through the strait dropped by approximately 80%. Pre-war, 80 to 90 tankers a day were transiting. Post-war, according to data tracked by analysts at Robin J. Brooks' Substack and corroborated by Morningstar and ABC News, that number fell to roughly 8 to 10 ships per day. Some trackers reported near zero. The strait wasn't fully closed in the military sense, but commercially it had effectively shut down. Now, at this point you might be wondering, okay, oil prices went up, but what does that actually mean for me at the gas pump? Let's get specific, because this is the part that hits every single American directly. According to Investopedia's analysis from early March 2026, the national average gasoline price climbed above $3.30 per gallon. According to CNN and ABC News, prices were running between $3.20 and $3.35 per gallon nationally, with wide regional variation. USA Today estimated the conflict was adding roughly 20 to 30 cents per gallon to what drivers were already paying. And PBS reported that experts were projecting the national average settling around $3.30 to $3.35 per gallon in the near term, if, and this is a big if, the conflict stays at its current level. But actually, the near-term number is not the scary one. The scary one is what happens if the strait stays closed. And that's exactly where Goldman Sachs comes in. According to Reuters on March 6, 2026, and confirmed by a Goldman Sachs Insights piece published the same week, Goldman's analysts warned that oil could surge above $100 per barrel if Hormuz flows do not recover. Bloomberg ran a headline that same day, traders warn 100 oil is imminent if Iran war keeps raging. And according to CNBC's analysis from March 2, 2020, if the closure becomes prolonged, Brent crude could breach $100 to $130 per barrel. The direct pump price translation of that, according to Barron's and multiple analyst reports cited by NBC News and ABC 13, U.S. gasoline could reach $4.50 to $6 per gallon. $6. And if you think that's the ceiling, the Express in the UK cited analysts projecting oil could potentially hit $150 per barrel in a worst-case extended closure scenario. At that level, we are not talking about an inconvenience at the pump. We are talking about a structural economic shock. Think about what $6 gas actually means for your life. It means the cost of your commute doubles. It means everything you buy at the grocery store gets more expensive because everything is shipped by truck. It means airlines raise ticket prices. It means the inflation that Americans were finally starting to see ease back comes roaring back at a level most people under 40 have never experienced. And here is the part that should make every viewer uncomfortable. The USS government, as of early March 2026, according to Reuters and Bloomberg, had no immediate plans to release oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. When a reporter asked President Trump about rising gas prices during the Iran operation, Reuters reported his response was 4 words: if they rise, they rise. That was the official position of the executive branch on your gas prices. And there's more. The USS also launched something called a $20 billion maritime reinsurance program to try to convince commercial shipping companies to keep sending tankers through the strait. Reuters broke that story on March 6, 2026. CNBC and Bloomberg confirmed it. The logic was simple. If ships can't get insurance to transit a war zone, no captain will send his vessel through, no matter how high oil prices get. So the U.S. government stepped in to backstop the insurance risk to the tune of $20 billion. $20 billion of taxpayer money essentially being used as a subsidy to keep oil flowing through a corridor that Iran was actively targeting with drones. Now let's step back from the immediate crisis for a moment, because there's a deeper story here that most coverage is missing, and this connects back to something I hinted at right at the very beginning of this video. Remember that number I said the government already knows? The one I told you would only make sense in context. Here it is. According to analysis published by LongYield and cited by multiple financial analysts, if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for more than 30 days, the probability of a global recession exceeds 75%. 75%. And the projected GDP contraction in a prolonged closure scenario is between 1.5 and 3% globally. Bloomberg warned in early March 2026 that the oil shock from the Iran war could fuel inflation and push economies toward recession. Al Jazeera noted on March 7 the combination of inflation spike and growth slowdown. And Chatham House, one of the world's most respected geopolitical think tanks, noted that while the global GDP impact might appear limited in the short term, emerging market economies are especially vulnerable, which means supply chains that feed into American consumer goods get disrupted in ways that extend far beyond just the gas pump. Here's the but, actually, moment you need to internalize about American energy independence. You've heard politicians on both sides tell you that we are energy independent, that we produce more oil than we consume, that OPEC can't hurt us anymore. But actually, the oil market doesn't work by geography. It works by price. And price is global. According to the Washington Post, the U.S. is still a net crude importer. And according to CNN's detailed analysis, even America's record domestic oil production cannot insulate American consumers from a global price shock triggered by a closure of the world's most critical choke point. This is not a political argument. This is how commodity markets function. When supply anywhere is disrupted, prices everywhere go up. Full stop. Now, you might be asking, hasn't Iran threatened to close the strait before? Isn't this just more bluster? And this is a fair and important question. The answer is yes, Iran has threatened to close the strait many times before. But something is categorically different this time. Let me explain why. In previous standoffs during the tanker war of the 1980s, during the 2012 nuclear standoff, during the 2019 tensions, Iran threatened closure as a deterrent, a bargaining chip. This time, according to Reuters on March 2, 2026, the IRGC didn't just threaten, they acted. They struck tankers, they fired on commercial vessels. Traffic dropped 80% in 1 week. This is not a threat, it's an ongoing operational reality. According to the New York Times reporting from March 6, 2026, tanker operators were actively rerouting ships around the Arabian Peninsula, a journey that adds approximately 2 to 3 weeks to transit times and massively increases shipping costs. That cost gets passed on to producers, to refiners, to distributors, and ultimately to you at the pump. There is also a historical data point worth sitting with. During the 1980s tanker war between Iran and Iraq, according to historical records, up to 40% of the world's oil passed through the Strait of Hormuz at that time. Commercial shipping dropped approximately 25% during the peak of that conflict, and even with a 25% drop in the 1980s, global energy markets were severely disrupted. Today, with an 80 to 90% drop in tanker traffic, we are in territory that has no modern precedent. None. The International Crisis Group, BBC Analysis, and CNBC expert panels all used phrases like unprecedented and uncharted in describing what a prolonged closure would mean for global markets. So where does this go from here? What are the actual scenarios that could play out, and which one do you need to watch for? Because this is the question that will determine whether you're paying $3.50 at the pump or $6, and whether the broader economy tips into recession. According to expert analysis from Brookings Institution, The Guardian, and DW, there are essentially 3 trajectories. The first is a rapid de-escalation. A ceasefire is negotiated, tanker traffic resumes, oil prices stabilize back toward the mid-70s or low 80s per barrel, and gas prices pull back from their current elevated levels. The Guardian identified this as a possible but not likely outcome in the near term, given the appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, and a hardliner, on approximately March 9, 2026, as reported by Al Jazeera and Reuters. A hardliner at the top of Iran's power structure makes a quick diplomatic resolution less probable, not more. The second scenario is what most analysts consider the most likely near-term outcome, a prolonged air campaign with ongoing USS. And Israeli strikes, continued Iranian retaliation through drones and proxies, sustained disruption to Hormuz shipping, and oil prices remaining elevated in the $90 to $110 range. In this scenario, according to PBS expert analysis, USS, gasoline prices hover in the $3.50 to $4 range nationally, with spikes above $4 in states more dependent on Gulf origin oil. This scenario is painful but survivable for the economy, provided it doesn't drag on beyond 3 to 4 months. The third scenario is the one nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone is calculating for privately. A prolonged closure, Iranian attacks expanding to include pipeline infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, or the UAE, oil above $130 per barrel, gas in America cresting $5 to $6 a gallon, and the global economy sliding into recession. Bloomberg warned about this on March 3, 2026. Fortune ran a piece on March 8, warning of 100+ oil if Hormuz stays closed. The long-yield analysis puts the recession probability above 75% if the closure extends past 30 days. And here's what makes this scenario more likely than people want to admit. As of early March 2026, the USS has no plan to tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the world has limited alternative routing capacity, and Iran's new leadership has every political incentive to look strong and uncompromising. There is one more piece of this puzzle I want you to know before we wrap up. And this connects directly back to the open loop I set up at the very start of this video. I told you there was a number your government already knows. The number isn't just $6 a gallon, the number is 30 days, that is the threshold. According to the LongYield financial analysis, and echoed by multiple institutional investors, 30 days of Hormuz closure is the inflection point at which the global economy transitions from severe disruption to probable recession. And right now, as of the first week of March 2026, we are already past day 7 of significantly disrupted traffic. The clock is running. The U.S. has launched a $20 billion reinsurance program to try to restart commercial transits. Goldman Sachs is warning publicly about $100 oil. And when a reporter asked the president directly about gas prices, the answer was, if they rise, they rise. So, the 30-day clock matters, and you now know what the government already knows. Here's what you should be watching in the coming weeks. First, watch the tanker traffic data. If ships start moving through the strait again, if that number climbs back from 8 or 10 transits a day toward the pre-war average of 80 or 90, prices will stabilize. Second, watch what Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, says publicly. If he signals any openness to negotiation, that's a de-escalation indicator. If he doubles down on his father's hardline positions, expect continued and potentially escalating conflict. Third, watch the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. If the U.S. government reverses course and announces an SPR release, that is a signal that officials believe prices are becoming politically untenable, and it would provide some short-term downward pressure on oil costs. Fourth, watch what happens to U.S. inflation data in the next 30 to 60 days. If gasoline stays above $3.50 and the CPI starts ticking back up, the Federal Reserve may face an impossible situation. Inflation rising while growth is slowing. The combination economists call stagflation. If you are an American driver, a small business owner, a consumer, or just someone who buys food that gets shipped by truck, and that's everyone, this situation in a 21-mile stretch of water in the Persian Gulf is directly your situation. The decisions made in Tehran, Washington, and Tel Aviv in the next 30 days will determine whether your gas bill stays around $3.30 per gallon or whether it climbs toward $5.50, $6. This is not distant geopolitics. This is the pump you pull into on Tuesday morning. This is the price on the sign you see every single day. The world has been here before. In the 1973 oil embargo, in the 1980s tanker war, in the 2008 price spike. But we have never seen a closure of this scale, this speed, with oil tanker traffic dropping 80 to 90% in a single week. And we have never faced it with a global economy already dealing with elevated inflation, rising debt levels, and geopolitical fractures running from Ukraine to Taiwan to now the Persian Gulf. So stay informed. Watch those 4 indicators. And if you found this breakdown useful, share it with someone who needs to understand why what happens in the Gulf directly affects their life here at home. More explainers on what comes next in Iran are on their way, because this story is nowhere near over, and you need to be ready.